welcome to New York City Atheists Live on Tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists Incorporated. I'm your host, Dennis Horvitz, the David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned. You're probably wondering why we have this strange arrangement, and I have a mysterious person in front of me whose back shall unfortunately remain to you for the entire show. The reason for this is that he is an Arab atheist who goes by the name of ALPHARABIUS. And why don't we just start by explaining the reason for your anonymity?
So there's two reasons. One is my personal family reasons, primarily that I have not come out, so to speak, to my parents or siblings or essentially any of my relatives. And I don't think I will be. Mainly because I can predict their reaction as, one of being heartbroken, subsequently followed by a complete, boycott. You're dead to us.
Not an unfamiliar, not an uncommon occurrence.
Right, and I just rather kind of have a good relationship with them as long as they're with us, and it just works easy.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do have siblings, yes.
And I assume they're also not aware of your
Yes, nobody is, right. The other reason is that I frequently travel to the Middle East. And in many countries in the Middle East, being an atheist, at least publicly acknowledged atheist, is sometimes punishable by death, in countries like Saudi Arabia, which I do go to, and I probably will be in the future. Even if countries like Egypt that don't have that law in the books, there is a major social stigma, and there's significant harassment to somebody who is publicly known to be an atheist.
And certainly the police are unlikely to run to your defense in any case.
They'll chip in.
They'll more than likely chip in. Can I ask what kind of business you're in that you would take you to anywhere?
Oh, it's family.
It's just family
ties, right.
So that leads me to our next question. Your ethnic origin, actually.
So I was born in Egypt.
In Egypt.
Grew up in Cairo. Among 20 million people, that's sufficient anonymity, I would hope.
Right.
And Egypt, while a lot of Egyptians prefer to call themselves Egyptian, Arabic is the primary language there, and therefore the Arab label. Right.
But would it be correct to say that you are an ethnic Arab?
Absolutely.
Right. You are involved, but stateside you're involved. Can we say where you're actually living in the United States, or would you rather not mention that? Okay, you would rather not mention where you are living. Are you involved in any kind of organized atheist activity? Or?
Well, I am just part of our local meetup group. It's a very social group. We get together for happy hours or, pool parties or whatever. It's just a way to kind of create a social circle now that I no longer have a mosque to kind of connect with. And that has been working very well. I've been, welcomed there, and I feel very at home hanging out with fellow infidels.
Are you aware of, and are you in touch with any other ethnic Arab atheists?
Not directly. So I am part of the Arab Atheist Network, which is a fairly, probably the only consortium of Arab atheists online. And actually, sadly, this is probably the only way that an Arab atheist could get to know other like-minded individuals who are also Arab, converse about these things. It's also one of the very few places. It is also one of the very few places where writings about atheism in the Arabic language are published, and essentially free debate is available.
Which is probably not available to most people living in most Arab states at the moment.
Right. Not only that, it's even if you go into any of the other Arab forums or an Islamic forum, there is severe censorship on what you can and can't say.
Do you have a sense that there is any kind of, I'm not even going to say movement, but any kind of any groups, any atheist groups within these Arab states? Is there?
So atheists per se, I would dare to venture a guess and say no. Maybe within Lebanon there might be some. Lebanon is one of the more secular liberal countries in the Arab world.
I know, at least as of a few years ago, and I haven't checked recently, that there's kind of an anti-Islamic movement or a liberal, I don't know if it's actually anti-Islamic, if that's the correct way to call it. But there seems to be a very liberal movement within a lot of Arab countries now. And of course, it's in its infancy. But.
Correct. Well, actually, it's not quite. If you can trace that back mainly to the socialist era and even the communist era, back in the good old Cold War days. A lot of the Arab states, while officially in the non-alliance organization, they were much closer to the Soviet Union with the socialist ideals and communist ideals, and that was a form of secularism.
Right.
And in fact, a lot of the people now stereotype atheism with communism, and they make that connection, and we have to often to kind of explain our way out of this. However,
that's true. I think of atheists in general is that we're conflated with Stalinist regime and Mao Zedong and people like that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, I was just going to point out that I think the strong socialist and communist movements in the Arab world have all but died out. They're essentially minority movements right now, or opposition movements. There are other secular movements that are more Western-style secular movements. In most countries, again, they are a minority political movement. They are growing. Not fast enough, unfortunately. There's a strong Islamic movement, both political and social, that is brewing in the Arab world, and that one is growing at a much faster pace than those other secular groups. Even though the secular groups wouldn't quite identify as being an atheist, they would just say, we believe in the separation of church and state, but we still maintain a private religion.
So in other words, you're basically confined to expression to your online, more or less. And like I said, I haven't. I don't remember which site it was, but I know that there was some. Would it be correct to call it anti-Islamic?
Right. So the anti-Islamic movement, it varies between countries. So for example, Tunisia, there's a very strong secular and anti-Islamic movement where they ban most expressions of Islam. Similarly in Turkey, there used to be one, although it's kind of people who support Islam are fighting back. And even Europeans who support general freedom of expression are siding with the pro-Islamic side because, and this is also my opinion, I think a secular society with the separation of church and state is a two-way relationship. State doesn't meddle in church, and church doesn't meddle in state. And I think in a lot of the Arab world, they think of it as church not meddling in state, but state is still free to meddle in the church.
Well, I know that in the Netherlands, they've kind of bent over backwards in allowing whole sections of the Netherlands, or at least certain neighborhoods in some of the bigger cities, to be completely run by Sharia law, because of they're so liberal about religion, and that they don't want to even intervene when it's obvious that women are being oppressed under that kind of situation. I'm just let me just backtrack a little bit. Were you born a Muslim? Did you actually were you ever a believing Muslim?
Yes, I actually was. I was born to a fairly religious family too. I was personally a very devout Muslim.
And you would be Sunni?
That's correct. I was Sunni. I was a very devout Muslim. I'm well read about Islam. I've studied a lot of it. I would have ranked myself in the top percentile of people who have deep knowledge about it. And I think it's a trend. Actually, most of the atheists I know tend to be very well versed in Islamic tradition, just like you find a lot of atheists in the West well versed in Christianity. And
I have absolutely found that atheists tend to know more about the religion of believers than most believers themselves. I will confess personally, that I'm woefully ignorant about Islam. I have only the most, I probably know as much about it as anybody who could kind of just pick it up. Maybe give a little background of Islam and you know, that kind of thing. But before I do that, I just going back to your being a practicing Muslim. What was the moment? Was there a moment where you, or was it gradual?
There was a moment, and then there was a gradual process. I would say my moment was a personal crisis involving a severe illness of a family member, and I was surprised at myself because I didn't even try to get support or solace from religion or from God. I found myself completely relying on just practical, pragmatic resolution. I never thought to sit and pray. I thought to get online and research the illness and talk to the doctors and just do whatever practical steps it take. I never stopped to pray. And it dawned on me because up until that point I've never had a crisis with that magnitude. And I always thought that when something like that happened, that's what religion would be most able to help. And I think it just wasn't, I kind of felt that deep in my heart, I didn't see a plausible contribution this could have made. And I think that was the point when it made me start thinking, well, what exactly is the value of religion to me? Why am I praying? Am I praying because I'm supposed to pray, or am I praying because there's some kind of benefit that I get? And the honest answer was, I'm praying because I have to pray, otherwise I'm going to go to hellfire. Or otherwise I'm going to be perceived by my fellow Muslims as being a very bad Muslim for not praying. And so, I made a decision to not worship or pray or fast unless I wanted to. And
sorry to interrupt you, but it's interesting that you say that you had a personal crisis and you felt galvanized, you felt motivated to do very practical things, pragmatic things. In some ways, that's kind of opposite to a lot of stories that I hear about people who are in the same or similar situations and who pray first,
right,
or wind up in a tragic situation because they prayed as opposed to doing something. Right. So it's very interesting that your first thought was bang to do something.
Right. Actually, I do think my first thoughts were probably involving blasphemy against God when I first found out. But I don't have a very clear recollection of the first hours. But I do remember clearly that at no point in time did I, turn to God at all, and that kind of surprised me because there's always this assumption that even atheists will turn to God in the moments of crisis.
Right. No atheists in foxholes, as they say.
And you know what? I was a true believer, and I did not turn to God. I turned to medical science.
Well, it's funny. Certainly no one is more critical of religious fundamentalism than I am, but you have to say that most of them aren't so absolutely crazy as to literally trust God, when there's a crisis. I mean,
I would actually disagree with you.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's just not Islam, but I can give you anecdotes about Islam, just because I know about it. But there are individuals who, for example, used to believe that the spit of the prophet has healing property. Well, okay, maybe that's the prophet, and that was, But now people would perceive, let's say, especially psychological ailments, as being possessed by some kind of devilish creature, and then they seek, exorcism without actually thinking that it may be a medical issue. A lot of people do similar things with physical ailments, and I would say that's a very, an example of such. There's a lot of folk treatment involved with strong believers, and then if I just abandon Islam for a minute and then talk about like Jehovah's Witnesses and not accepting blood transfusions, even when it comes to their kids, I think that's child abuse. I think it should be a crime. Right.
That certainly is true. I would certainly agree with that. But I guess I'm thinking more of mainstream believers, even some
Right.
I would say maybe I'm mostly Christian fundamentalists.
Right.
That you know, they may talk a lot about the power of prayer, for instance, but if their child gets sick,
they'll
right.
However, what is really upsetting here is that sure they will seek medical help, and then when their kid hopefully gets better, they'll say, "Oh, it's thanks be to Jesus."
They
you know,
yes,
it will, and there's a lot of argumentation about that. I mean, I love the Dr. House show and the Scrubs show. They had this theme discussed a lot, and you know, it's just like. You see the annoyment there. It's like, I did all this for you, and then you're like going and thanking Jesus,
right.
You know?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that God gets all the credit and none of the blame.
That's right, that's right.
Of course, as I like to say, don't blame God. After all, he's only human. You know? But certainly a human invention. So, I don't know. Can you give me some kind of give us some kind of background as far as Arab atheism?
Right.
Because I know that because I attended your talk yesterday, and by the way, let me just interrupt and say that in case you were unaware, we are taping this show at the Atheist Alliance International Convention in beautiful downtown Burbank. We are also, by the way, and I neglected to mention, kind of mushing shows together with Atheist Viewpoint. David Silverman, who is my co-host on that show, could not be here. But anyway, yeah, we ALPHARABIUS gave a talk yesterday, which I was in attendance. So. How do you go about starting to reverse this process to create a more secular?
Oh boy, that's a couple of $1 billion worth of questions.
It sure is.
You know what? I will outright say that I've ran a lot of scenarios in my head. I've thought about it, and I don't think there's a comprehensive answer that I can give. I can give a couple of, you know, pretty obvious things that need to be done, and just, you know, hopefully with patience and a lot of luck get there. I think a big part of it is just promoting critical thinking and general kind of respect for the intellect, skepticism, promoting science, real science. One of the things that it dawned on me is that I cannot think of a single book in the Arabic language that describes Darwinian evolution. As a scientific theory. They are almost exclusively countering it or rebutting it or referring to it casually as a defunct theory.
Now, is that fairly recent, or has that been kind of the opinion all along?
So I know this is the reality. If you walk into a bookstore in the Arabic world, you're very unlikely to find it. In fact, most of these books are banned. Even Turkey. Some would say the most enlightened and progressive of all the Muslim countries, bans pretty much all of Richard Dawkins' books.
Right. Well, they're actually, unfortunately, and as an American, I'm very embarrassed to say this, that on a survey of, I think, 34 nations, the United States was number 33 at the bottom of the list, and just under that was Turkey. So, and if that's, you know, the most enlightened of the Islamic states, that's
pretty bad.
That's
well,
pretty bad,
but you see, okay, so here I think, and you know, as an American, it shames me to also say that I think the blame is on the American people that we are like that.
Yes.
If I go to the Arab world, and I'm pretty sure the statistics will be more like 95%, you know, believe that God created the earth. I would excuse them because they genuinely do not have scientific material to do that. I think the internet is changing that.
Yes.
It is changing it dramatically.
Yes.
And you know, at the Arab Atheist Network, we receive, you know, I'm not going to say hundreds, I'd say tens, you know, of individuals who join us every day, confessing that they've always thought like that, and they just felt so alone. And you know, now that they read stuff about here. And they feel much better. We have a whole section translating English articles about science and evolution and so forth on our site. And I'm surprised about how much people find that useful.
Do you, have you actually met in person any other Arab atheists at all?
Actually nobody from our network, but I just met a very nice couple here at the conference who were of Arabic ancestry as well, and it was a pleasure meeting them and just talking with them.
Well, I have to tell you that, and my regular viewers, both of them, I've said this many times, that perhaps one of the most important things that a show like this does, the New York City Atheists Live on Tape, and New York City Atheists as a group, American Atheists, and all of these atheist humanistic groups, one of the most important things that we do is just in existing is to let other atheists know that whether you're a former Islamic, former Christian, former Jewish, whatever, that's primarily one of the most important things we do. And hardly, in New York City, we have a tabling. We actually, on Saturdays, we set up a table with, New York City Atheist table in Columbus Circle across from the Times Square, the Time Warner building. And hardly a weekend goes by where somebody doesn't walk by and say, I'm an atheist. I didn't know you people existed.
Right.
And it's amazing. I mean, I can kind of understand it in the former Islamic community. But you would think that in the United States of America, where there's so much information available and freedom of information, that kind of thing, that more people would be aware, but they're not. So I can imagine it must be. So
personally, I find I get my own solace in person from my local atheist gatherings. And I certainly see that. I see a lot of people expressing anxiety and loneliness just because they're not able to get in person, and they feel like in their real world they're very isolated. But yeah, one of the nice things from coming to this conference was meeting other people who are very active in many of those fields, and I hope that collaboration comes out of it.
Do you have any sense that, I hate to be melodramatic, but do you have any sense of maybe a formation of an Arab atheist underground kind of thing coming up?
Well, I think there's already one, and just having the internet helps you organize a lot easier. So there is one. I think we follow a lot of the local issues. For example, recently there's a secular writer who had a fatwa issued against him by Azhar scholars. I believe it was Azhar scholars, basically calling him an apostate, which means basically they're giving a license for any zealous Muslim to go ahead and shoot that guy. And there are precedents to that. And so when things like that happen, we take an advocacy position here. There are other groups that are not quite atheists, but there's like a secular Arabic network and other groups like-minded that we sometimes will kind of do some solidarity in face of those kind of issues. But I hope that as things come along, as this group grows and gets more organized, that some kind of real activism can start coming out of it.
Now, you mentioned yesterday in your talk that you feel that younger Arabs are actually more receptive to rational thinking. It seems to be in Iranian.
Youth. So Iran is not an Arabic country, but I think a lot of us can relate to the youth movement there. I think when an Arab youth gets to about the age of 15 or 16, they kind of start either tending toward Islamic fundamentalism, hanging out more at mosques, or they start tending towards kind of intellectual enlightenment, where they start doing more reading about more modern stuff. A lot of the time society kind of pressures you to go to the side of the Islamic fundamentalist side. But I think there needs to be a lot of material available and kind of making it a hip thing to start leaning towards the Enlightenment and making science a nice thing.
Right. Well, and that's absolutely true. I do want to correct myself. As you said, Iran is not an Arab country. I should have used the word Islamic.
Right.
But it's known that certainly since the Islamic Revolution of
Right.
Ayatollah Khomeini, Ruhollah Khomeini, the Iranian youth over the years have tended to be more pro-Western.
That's right. Actually, I absolutely believe it's true that there has not been a better advertisement and call for atheism in Iran than the Islamic Revolution. It has done much better work at, converting people to atheism than any other single activity.
Right, because of its oppression. I guess.
It's oppression. Actually, a very large number of Iranians are self-confessed atheists. I meet a lot of them here in the United States, and they're very matter of fact about it.
Right.
And
because they can be in the United States.
That's right, and
yeah.
A lot of them actually, don't have the kind of ties back there, or they actually never go there for other reasons, like for security reasons or whatever.
Right.
And so they're very matter of fact about their atheism, and a lot of them do cite the atrocities of that regime.
Yeah, I would think that there are probably a lot of Iranians that probably can't go back.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Because they'd be imprisoned or
harassed, or yeah.
All right. So, what do you? I don't know. What can non-Arab atheists do to support?
So I think, there's a couple of things. I'd say first and foremost, let's say at the political level, we need, of course, we always lobby for whatever is good for America, and I think that should be our priority, certainly. But I think we owe it to the rest of the world to have our values preached. We believe in them. We believe they are good, and we believe that people need to be given an opportunity to at least consider them and look at them freely. I don't think there's a big debate on whether freedom is better than despotism. I think I think it's been settled.
Yeah.
And so these countries need freedom. They need the ability to freely express their thoughts, to freely express their beliefs, their ideas, and I think we should be very conscious about that when we're dealing in our foreign politics. We should not, I disagree with President Obama when he says that we need to deal with the Islamic and Arabic world from a position of respect. And while I understand the sentiment and the diplomatic pragmatism of that, I think it sends a wrong message. I mean, is it the government? Are we respecting them? Are we respecting the culture? We need to think about